Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be a video on a Gameweek 3 draft wildcard. Now, a lot of people have been asking me about a Gameweek 3 draft wildcard, so I imagine a lot of you guys have already activated the button. You've been capturing some price rises, you've been avoiding some price falls. That's totally fine. I actually think Gameweek 3 is a very strong wildcard. The reason why is because I think that the transfer window will close one day before the deadline. So the deadline's on Saturday morning UK time. The transfer window deadline for the Premier League is actually Friday evening. So you will get all the deadline news for the transfers. And the only issue, I suppose, is that the international break will come right after that in Game Week 4. I do think that it's a little bit overstated how impactful international breaks are. But keep in mind, of course, that they have been significant before. So it really depends on what you want. Another thing to point out now is that the Game Week 3 draft wildcard is quite convenient in terms of actually going for some Arsenal assets. Maybe holding them in your bench in the near future. And then actually having a team that actually looks relatively strong for the Game Week 6 landscape and beyond. What I like about the Game Week 3 wildcard as well is simply there's a lot of price rises and falls for a lot of key players. Like even Isak, Watkins, these sorts of players are all moving up and down in price. You might still want to go back into them. So once again, the transfer value aspect of the game is very important in the first few game weeks of the season because a lot more people are prone to making, sales and buys, right? So that's just the reality. I'd also like to shout out Fantasy Football Hub right now for supporting the content. They're a fantastic tool to help improve and increase your rank as an FPL manager. They have two offers right now, 50% off, which is still available, and also an offer to win your mini league or get your money back. So have a look at the link in bio for Fantasy Football Hub and have a look at the tools. You can even actually look at the suggested AI wildcard that they have for Game Week 3, just to compare it to maybe even my draft right now. Now, for the draft for this week for Game Week 3, the goalkeeper that I actually love the most is Martinez. The reason why I love Martinez is, let me just read off the Aston Villa fixtures for Game Week 3 and beyond. So it's Leicester, Everton, Wolves, Ipswich, Man United, Fulham, and Bournemouth. That's 6 fixtures in a row that are just incredible. I don't see any reason to really switch off of Emi Martinez as goalkeeper. It's a very, very long run of games. You can then reconsider maybe whether you want to keep him or not when the fixtures get a little bit tougher. But that's very hard to pass up, a standalone goalkeeper having such a good fixture run. In the defense, because we're trying to avoid tripling up on Aston Villa by going double Aston Villa defense, I've sort of replaced the role that I have within my own team within Consa with someone like Colwill. The reason why is because I think I've got a little bit more faith in Colwill and his ability to stay within the Chelsea team as a starter. You can see right now, based on the statistics so far that we've seen for Chelsea over the first 2 games, that actually Cucurella and Colwill have been quite crucial to the way that Chelsea build out from the back. They've been very progressive, and I think Colwill is unique in the system, and I do really like Colwill. So that's why Colwill is within the team. I also have Dunk because I think he's absolutely nailed within this Brighton team. Barco's gone. There's no really other options to go for other than Van Heck, who's a very ball progressing defender, but the big difference is that you're going for Dunk for FPL points, right? You want that bullet header. Dunk will present you that bullet header more opportunities and more times than Van Heck. So that's why I've gone for Dunk. As far as the other defenders, I feel like the big toss-up is actually between Guardiola and Robertson. You can obviously swap these defenders around because we have multiple 6.0 defenders in the game that are very good. But with Robertson, I think you either decide whether you think Robertson is absolutely nailed across even the Champions League fixtures and that he won't be rotated, or you apply the same logic to someone like Guardiola. And if I had to choose one or the other, I'd probably choose Guardiola. Yes, of course, he's playing a little bit more of a defensive role this season, whereas Robertson continues to play a very advanced, progressive role for Liverpool. So if you actually think that Liverpool have improved as a team on defense, for example, and you like Robertson's minutes, maybe Robertson's the one to go for. But I do really like Guardiola because I'm still sort of safe and comfortable within the territory that I think that City are still the better defense over Liverpool. So over a prolonged run of games, if you're trying to keep these players for a long, long time and not make transfers over them, I probably still like Guardiola over Robertson. And then we have Mosquera and Gabriel. The big loss in this draft, obviously, is no Alexander or Trent Alexander-Arnold. I would say this is because this draft is actually a sub 100 million draft. This draft is 99.5 million. If you actually have been able to capture price rises, if you've been able to dodge price falls, I would just go for Trent over Guardiola. That's a very simple transfer that I think I would be happy to make if I had that 0.5 million in the bank. Now, Mosquera is just a 4.0 defender. I think he's better than FaZe. I think he's better than Harwood Bellis. And that's simply because I just think Wolves are a touch better than Southampton and Leicester. As far as, let's say, Johnson, I would apply the same logic there. However, the one pick that's interesting is Nedeljkovic from Aston Villa. Now, this draft already has triple Aston Villa, so you might have to change some things around. Maybe the goalkeeper is the way to go. But I would say that I would want to go for Mosquera because it seems like Aston Villa are actually going for Geertruida from Feyenoord as a right-back transfer option. So anyways, if you're on the wildcard draft, you can definitely consider going for Nedeljkovic as your right back if it seems like Aston Villa do not finally sign another right back within this transfer window. But if they do, then obviously that option's cut off in my opinion. You just go with Mosquera as a little bit of bench depth, and that's it. In the midfield, what I love about the Gameweek 3 draft wildcard, and specifically why I think I've actually considered it myself a lot, is the beauty of Saka, Palmer, and Salah as a holding trio of premiums in the game that are just fantastic. Yes, we've heard the news that Tony might join Chelsea. I don't think he's going to take penalties off of Palmer. I think he's got such a stellar penalty record that there's no reason to displace him. He is the main man for the Chelsea team. I don't see that changing. With Salah and Saka, you have players that are fantastic captaincy options over the next few weeks. Salah specifically in game weeks 4 and 5. You can consider game week 3, for example, to be one of those weeks where you go for either a Palmer captaincy or a Saka captaincy. Both these options are fantastic in my opinion, and there's actually no wrong answer. That's why I kind of like Palmer so much, because he actually has, within this Chelsea team as well, just a wonderful run of games, right? Effectively, game weeks 3 to 8 for Chelsea are fantastic because all the fixtures are truly green fixtures. There's Crystal Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away, Brighton at home, Nottingham Forest at home, and then, of course, it's Liverpool away. Then the fixtures get a little bit tougher. You can reconsider whether you want to keep Palmer around that time. But for now, Palmer's just an immediate hold, and he's such an easy asset to own. The other midfielders in this draft are actually Rodgers and Mbeumo. Now, the Mbeumo position is a very interesting and curious position because I feel like it actually depends on what you feel about Eze. Mbeumo has an amazing fixture this week. It's Southampton at home. So this is the fixture I would definitely jump onto Mbeumo for. But the question is, do you want to book transfers in advance? Because if you want to sort of get a little bit of value, I would say that the logical transfer in game week 4 for this draft is to go from Mbeumo to Eze on game week 4. Because you don't want to have Mbeumo versus Man City away. You probably don't want him as well for Spurs away. However, the run of games after that for Mbeumo are so good that you either make the decision on this draft, right, to go for Mbeumo and hold him over this, or you actually maybe even start the draft with Eze instead and then look at an opportunity like game week 6 to jump onto Mbeumo. I think both options are totally fine. It depends on whether you want to book transfers in advance. I don't think it's really recommended, to be honest, but I think you can also just hold Mbeumo as a pick as well. That's basically option C, where you just hold Mbeumo, you tank the game week 4, game week 5 games, you hope that the rotation will actually cover you, which can actually work out really well because this draft will actually have 8 attackers. Rodgers is just an amazing pick. I do feel bad with my own FPL team that I actually didn't have Rodgers in my team, and I kind of like booked a transfer towards Rodgers this week. Although I would also say that for the managers that actually had Nkunku and Rodgers, it seems like they're also struggling to find another option to move into in the midfield position because there's really not too many options to go for outside of, let's say, Gibbs White, maybe Bailey, maybe Smith Rowe. I really like Rodgers because he's just so cheap. He really does seem like someone who's actually nailed within this Aston Villa team. He looks absolutely brilliant. I think there's a key change as well when I'm someone who really likes looking into data as well. He is a progressing player, right? A developing young player. On top of that, too, you kind of see a position change. Last season, he was sort of operating in a left wing type position, playing multiple different roles in the team. Now it seems like his definitive role is effectively as a 10 or even a second striker within this team. And I think that's very, very key in terms of assessing why Rodgers is interesting. 290 minutes so far. However, there's Champions League around the corner, so we might expect that the minutes get a little bit worse. But I really do think Rodgers is a key player now for Aston Villa, and that's just reality. So that's the midfield. And as I said, the beauty of this draft, in my opinion, is Saka, Palmer, and Salah, and just holding these premiums, not having to change things around. Yes, of course. What does that mean? That means that we don't have Erling Haaland. And that's one of the big, I would say, maybe detriments of this draft. I don't think if you're planning to keep Haaland in your team, you have Haaland in your team, don't wildcard 3, right? Wildcard 3 is about if you want to have this structure in place, you're comfortable with going against Haaland for a few game weeks up until maybe game week 9, maybe game week 10. If you're comfortable doing that without Haaland, I think this is the beauty of wildcard 3. It's a very strong draft. You have plenty of captaincies. We've already seen that Saka, Palmer, and Salah can sort of match Haaland, right? I'm not saying that they're better assets than Haaland. Absolutely not. But the reality is, of course, there's a 2.5 million price difference between him and Salah. There's also a 5 million price difference between him and Saka. So, of course, you're going to have other aspects of the draft which will succeed, right? And we've seen already that Arsenal defense has been the big pro really to the non-Haaland drafts because you get access to the better defenses. So far, Arsenal have gotten some pretty jammy clean sheets, but that's what you sort of expect, right? From such a high-quality defense, they probably deserve those clean sheets more often than not. And so Arsenal have gotten those clean sheets so far, and some of the Haaland-only drafts have struggled a little bit to compete with that sort of missing value. But I think it is a game of swings in FPL. And this is what you're sort of prepared to go with, right? By sacrificing Haaland within a draft structure. Now, the forward line that we're actually going to go with now is João Pedro, Evan Nilsson, and Watkins. What I like about this draft structure is, once again, your 8th attacker is Rodgers, but technically he can play a lot of these fixtures depending on how you evaluate him as a pick. If his minutes decline in the Champions League, you still have 3 forwards, and that's totally fine. Here in this week where João Pedro is playing versus Arsenal, you just bench João Pedro. Evan Nilsson is a pick that I've gone for because I'm not that confident right now in a lot of the 5.5 picks. What are the 5.5 picks? It's Vardy, it's Strand Larson, and it's Armstrong. I'm a little bit cooler on all these players right now because it seems like Southampton's signing another forward. We're also getting news about, let's say, Vardy in general, right? His fitness, it doesn't really seem like he's able to play more than 70, 75 minutes a game. So that already sort of decreases his value as an asset. With Evan Nilsson, he's been signed for a lot of money. I think he's on penalties, and I think that's a key reason for why you might want to jump onto a Bournemouth player here that can also rotate, right? When he has bad fixtures with Bournemouth, you just have players like Rodgers and João Pedro who can actually rotate with Evan Nilsson really well. The last pick is Watkins, and a lot of people might be a little bit sour on Watkins, but the reality is, as I said, and as I read in the beginning with the Martinez fixtures, Aston Villa just have an amazing run of games, so it's very hard to actually dodge the opportunity to jump on Watkins when you're on a wildcard 3. You can go for Havertz, in my opinion. That's one option. You can go for Isak as well. That's another option. But Isak feels like you're sort of sticking towards the draft that everyone else has right now. When you have an opportunity right now to either choose between going for Havertz, right, and just sort of keeping him as a pick for all this time, or actually jumping on Watkins, believing that his minutes will improve. What has been the problem with Watkins so far? He's played 2 65, 60-minute games. It doesn't look good. We're seeing potentially a season where Duran will get more minutes, right? He hasn't been sold. It seems like he's going to stay in Aston Villa. If you're concerned that Watkins will rotate, particularly with the Champions League demands for Aston Villa, then of course Watkins is going to be a worse pick in FPL. That's a simple reality. If you also think he's not on penalties, that's also probably another reason to not go on Watkins. But I just think that this run is so good, and there's a big differential opportunity here. I'm just going for Watkins, who's actually lesser owned, even close to a price drop potentially on this wild card, that I do think it's worth jumping on the upside of Watkins. Now, if you don't want to go for Watkins, you want to have a more well-rounded team, like let's say you go back to the Havertz and the Isaks of the world, you can definitely use the 0.5 to make some upgrades. What would I use those upgrades for? Potentially the defense, potentially maybe a rotating 4.5 goalkeeper, so that when Martinez has worse games after game week 8, you can actually look at maybe another sort of rotating goalkeeper as well in the future. So those are the kind of utilities, I suppose, that you can use with the sort of excess cash. As I said, if you plan to save a little bit more money as well, that could also give you Trent somewhere else within this draft. If you go Watkins to, let's say, back down to Isak, or Watkins back down to Havertz, you can definitely go Guardiola to Trent if you actually really feel like you don't want to miss out on the Trent boat. And so that's sort of my thoughts right now in terms of the Game Week 3 draft wildcard. The way that I would actually line this team up for Game Week 3 is as follows. So I would actually play Emi Martinez once again as the goalkeeper. Fabianski falls into the bench. I would be playing Colwill, Guardiola, and Gabriel this week, with Dunk and Mosquera in the bench respectively. Mosquera probably a little bit ahead of Dunk on the bench. In the midfield, I would be playing Saka, Rodgers, Mbumo, Palmer, and Salah. And I'd also captain Salah this week. The reason why is because I think ultimately it's a little bit of a toss-up between Palmer and Saka. I prefer my home fixtures. I think that ultimately, if I had to choose over all the teams that are sort of being faced off here between, let's say, Arsenal and Chelsea, Crystal Palace are the weaker team versus Brighton, in my mind, at least right now, just based on what we've seen in the short sample so far and just the historical data. So I would take Palmer here in this situation. In the front line, I would actually bench João Pedro, and I'd play Evan Nilsson and Watkins. So we'd be fielding out a 3-5-2. The bench order would be as follows. It would be João Pedro first, then we'd actually have Mosquera, and then Dunk and Fabianski as the bench goalkeeper. As I said, the captaincies can be sort of swung around. You might even want to go for a Salah captaincy, but I think the value of going for a Game Week 3 draft wildcard is also jumping on to Palmer, who not many engaged managers, I'd say, own right now. Some people obviously decided to start the season with Palmer, which is totally fine. But I just think that looking at some of the effective ownerships from sort of elite managers, it seems like a lot more people own the likes of Salah, the likes of Saka, the likes of Haaland. So Palmer, I think, is a great differential captaincy as well for that reason. And that's how I would line up this team for Game Week 3. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys think about this draft. Are you prepared to go on a Game Week 3 wildcard if things go wrong for your team, if unexpected news happens? Because I definitely am. And this is probably very, very close, I would say, to the draft that I would be going for if there's any crazy news this week that we have to sort of deal with as an FPL manager. So thank you guys so much again. I'll see you guys soon for more content. Take care and goodbye.